Picture this, all jokes aside, you're a plastic bottle in a factory in Malaysia. You've been minding your own business for 30, 40 years. For years, you survived the financial crisis of Asia. You survived COVID. You survived your CEO's experimental synergy in 2014 that told everyone that everyone needs to be part of a yoga board mat or something.
You can see the correlation is undeniable. A 200% increase in profits directly tied to yoga mat.
Like that. And then, bam, China just decides you don't exist anymore. Not with a war, not with a scandal, just with cheaper plastic, cheaper products, cheaper services. Welcome to the geopolitical hellscape we're calling China 2.0, the shock from hell. Strap in, touch the grass while you can, stock up on those plastic bottles because things are about to get incredibly, incredibly real. Hello, beautiful, economically anxious people of the internet. Today we're diving, and I mean diving, better yet, cannonballing into the most quietly terrifying stories going around my head and the world at the moment. It's China, manufacturing, exports, and the slow, the polite, the bureaucratically worded thing of dreams. Now, before you say, oh great, another China video from another guy with a ring light, but let me tell you, this one is definitely different. Because, okay, I am a guy with a ring light, but this one just isn't only about trade deficits and tariffs and wonky IMF graphs, the International Monetary Fund, that make you feel stupid at dinner parties and make you think about your GCSE or A-level maths in high school. This is an actual existential story. This is a story about whether the rules of economic reality, the rules that lifted Japan, then Korea, then Taiwan, then China itself out of poverty, whether those rules, that rules-based order, they still exist, or if something diametrically different is coming about. Spoiler, nobody has actually sent the memo yet, so we're gonna get into this together. So let's go back. Let's go way back to a delightful little economic theory invented by a Japanese economist in the 30s, I believe, called the flying geese paradigm. Yes, flying geese. This is real. Economists love animals. I don't know why their models and their economics measure. Oh, I don't know why. So despite the name, the idea is beautiful in its simplicity. So think of Asia as a flock of birds in a formation, like a flying V. Japan is the lead goose, the big boy, flying high, making Toyotas and Sonys fancy things. Then Japan moves up the industrial food chain into more fancier, more sophisticated microchips. Textiles no longer the part of it anymore. They're getting rich and they're getting rich of high tech. It's orderly, it's beautiful, it's basically capitalism thriving with surprisingly good table manners, might I add. And then China happened. Not like China didn't do anything wrong per se. China just showed up as a goose the size of a Boeing 747. And instead of flying in formation, sticking to the rules, it just hovered over the entire flock like some kind of economic Death Star, blocking out the sun for every smaller bird trying to catch a convection thermal and ride those winds, baby. As one economist at Capital Economics said, and I love this man for his honesty, he put it this way, he said, because of its scale, you could say that China encompasses a whole flock of geese. A whole flock, gone, absorbed, honk, goodbye, arrivederci. So here's how the nightmare scenario for countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Malaysia transpires. For decades, the playbook was cheaper than China. Be cheaper than China. Attract the factories that China doesn't want anymore. Get rich, upgrade, get into the middle income trap, rinse and repeat. It worked. It literally has worked for 50 years. I'm not degrading that. It literally has worked. But here's the cosmic joke, the galactic celestial goat. The existential gut punch that would make even the most accomplished Delta Force operator weep into his beret. Now, I'm not sure if Delta Force wears beret. I don't know. But China, back to China. China never really left the cheap stuff. It just also started dominating the expensive stuff, while simultaneously at scale dominating everything. Electric vehicle, China. Solar panel, China. Shoes, China. Textile, China. It's like if your oldest sibling not only refused to move out of their bedroom, but also took over your bedroom, the garage, and is now eyeing the garden shed and taking all my toys. Oh my God, my memories, my trauma. No, it's not about me, guys. Indonesia's textile industry, about 60% of it closed between 2022 and 2025. Why? How? I tell you how. China. It's the land of the free, the home of the brave, the current mood, absolutely feral about tariffs. Let's not be coy about it. See, now, back in the China Shock 1.0, the original, the classic, the director's cut, America kind of just let it happen. Yeah, sure, US Congress screamed about currency manipulation, economists wrote very, very, very serious papers warning, and ultimately, obviously something happened. No, wrong. Almost nothing was done. The factories closed, they allowed it to happen, the Rust Belt, well, it rusted. The people who lost their jobs, and that's the part that matters, they never got rehired, they just got recirculated into lower productive jobs. And what did they do eventually? What actually happened eventually? Well, they elected Donald Trump twice, not once, twice, possibly more depending on when you're watching this. Who knows what's going to happen to the Constitution? So America learned its lesson, kind of, in the most chaotic possible way. Because this time, China Shock 2.0, the Trump administration did not sit back and philosophize. Oh no, they pulled out the one thing an FT writer characterized in the following way. Now, this FT writer brilliantly called it, and I'm going to read this directly because I think it's the single piece of economic writing I've ever seen. They called it Tariffa Kedavra. Yes, Tariffa Kedavra. Tariffa Kedavra, like Avada Kedavra. The Killing Curse from Harry Potter in an article about macroeconomics published in the Financial Times. Yes, I kid you not, I'll try and link it. I want that writer to know you have my internal respect and my subtle envy. So America's response to China Shock 2.0 is essentially to point a wand at everything and yell a big spell. Tariffs on everything, tariffs on allies, tariffs on enemies, tariffs on tariffs, presumably. And here's where it gets delicious in its irony. America's share of Chinese exports has dropped dramatically as a result, 3 times more than it dropped during the initial China 1.0 shock. That means something is going on. Something's getting rejected somewhere. But where are the rejected goods going? Southeast Asia, obviously. The countries that were already being squeezed, who now get even more Chinese goods dumped on them because America slammed the door that China needs to put things through. It's like evicting your problem neighbor, expecting they just move on to the next family next door. They're still there, they're still causing you issues, it's just changed to a few doors down the road from you. Not a suitable solution for a long-term problem. So, I mean, all of this, me talking, a talking head talking about China, not knowing how to speak Chinese, I know. But the numbers are something I do understand. And the numbers, they don't lie. They are very, very uncomfortable, but they are very, very honest. So let's talk about the data, because the numbers in this story are so large, so unfathomably large, so unavoidable, unbridgeable, they've crossed the border from statistics into abstract horror. China's trade surplus with the 11 Asian bloc, that's Southeast Asia, by the way, hit a record $278 billion in 2025. Now, that's not billion with a cautious B, that's billion with a big B, a big I, a big double L, a big I, a big O, a big N, okay? Thank goodness I spelt that correctly, because that would have been incredibly embarrassing. With the energy of a man who owns 3 yachts and still asks for a discount. Up 45% from the year before. Vietnam alone, by themselves, imported $84 billion in electrical machinery and electronics from China last year. That's up 43%. That's ridiculous. Now, Vietnam, I love the country, by the way, been there many times, is supposed to be this great success story. And in many ways, it is a great success story. It's the country that attracted all of those factories fleeing China because of US tariffs. And it's a success story, like I said before. It's just also built on a Chinese foundation, because at least half of the Vietnam's raw manufacturing, all their materials come from China. So essentially, Vietnam is a manufacturing middleman. It buys Chinese materials, it assembles them, it slaps on made in Vietnam and a label that serves all purposes, and it sells it to America. And before you judge, that is a legitimate economic model, and it has created jobs and it has created growth, and it will persist in doing so. But it also means Vietnam's economic destiny is now held in Beijing's left hand and Washington's right hand simultaneously. Not a great place to be. And Vietnam is understandably nervously in the middle saying, please guys, don't clap, don't put them together, I don't want to get squashed like a bug. Cambodia, same thing. It imports 60% of raw materials from China. It's even in a worse and more precarious position than Vietnam. Even the companies doing well in the region are often Chinese companies that relocated to avoid tariffs. So when the factory opens in Vietnam, great, jobs galore, jobs for everyone, growth for everyone. But the senior engineers, where are they from? They're flying in from China every 3 weeks. That's not technology transfer. That's a very expensive commute that does not need Vietnam explicitly. I saw a famous Chinese owner in Dongguan, I think I butchered that, but in China somewhere, and he said, with the cheerful honesty of a man who has absolutely nothing to lose, that Vietnam's system does nothing to incentivize Vietnamese industrial development, either in creating new production processes or cultivating worker skills. Now, that's brutal, brutal honesty. Sir, might I say, you just diagnosed the entire geopolitical crisis in one sentence while presumably standing next to a large vat of polyethylene, which is going to be exported and at the cost of Vietnamese people. But hey, okay, sit back, relax, let's get existential. Because I promised you existential, and I deliver on my promises, unlike certain trade agreements out there. Here's the question that economists, serious, credential-having, conference-attending, big paycheck-earning economists are actually debating right now. Was the last 50 years of Asian economic development just a window in time, a fake, a fluke, a cosmic artifact that never really happened organically, but because of Chinese largesse, their heft, their flying Geese
remain trapped in its gravitational well?
Because the idea that poor countries could industrialize just by starting with cheap manufacturing, getting rich, moving up, I mean, Japan did it, right? Korea did it, Taiwan did it, China itself did it. It was the model, it is the model, it was the economic equivalent of the hero's trajectory, the narrative, the story, the rags to riches, the slumdog millionaire on a sovereign level. But what if China is simply too big, too subsidized, too communist, too entrenched for anyone else to ever follow that regime, that path again? What if the ladder just gets pulled up and there's a new model that needs to be invented? Not maliciously, well, I mean, possibly maliciously, who knows, but let's give the benefit of the doubt. But just structurally, think about it. By China's sheer arithmetic, their sheer mass, the gravitational pull of a manufacturing black hole so dense, so unfathomably large,
regional economies remain
so
trapped in
dark,
its gravitational well.
that lighter economic objects and bodies just can't escape their orbit. They can't go any further because they risk going into the event horizon. What if it's that?
The immense scale of the alpha goose creates a microclimate of devastating force, a collapse mechanism that few can withstand.
I mean, the flying geese theory was first formulated in Japan in the 1930s, a very different epoch. It was described as a beautiful, orderly world, a world of rules, a robust order, of sequential development, of shared prosperity flowing downwards like a waterfall through an entire region. But what happens when the goose is so large it generates its own gravitational pull, its own weather system? What happens when the rules, the beautifully orderly 50-year proven rules get suspended by an economy that is simultaneously its own customer and its own competitor? Surely, in that world, the model no longer works, and that is the China Shock 2.0. Well, in that scenario, I'll tell you what happens. A plastic factory in Malaysia closes after 30 years, a garment giant that dressed people in Walmart and in Uniqlo vanishes overnight, 250,000 Indonesian textiles jobs evaporate just like that, and everyone looks around going, is this fine? Is this just how it works now? Is that the model? Has it just kind of like sped up? And the answer is nobody knows, which is genuinely terrifying because these are the people who get paid to know what is the actual thing going on. All right, forget all of that rubbish, Justin. Forget all of that. Just tell us what we're here to hear. What do we do? Okay, solutions-based, Justin, because YouTube demands closure and I respect the rules and the formats. So there's options here, okay? Option 1, Southeast Asian countries can impose tariffs and anti-dumping legislation and duties. Malaysia already tried to do this on Chinese plastic and on polyester, but it's still not working as thoroughly as it could. Option 2, China can voluntarily restrain its exports. I don't know. Malaysia's deputy finance minister has literally called for Asian countries to have, quote, candid conversations about managing or even curtailing Chinese manufacturing capacity. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of that. Probably wouldn't understand a word of it because I don't speak Malay or Chinese. Now, obviously, option 2 was never going to be popular, and China's response to being accused of dumping, their official media said, and this is real, I kid you not, that Chinese exporters are, quote unquote, creating rich cross-border production and supply systems. So basically, shut up, right? Rich cross-border production and supply systems. RICH, rich. That's the diplomatic equivalent of stepping on someone's foot, on their damaged toe, on a bunion, and saying, you were just giving them a reflexology treatment, man. Calm down. The intentions were good, okay? Okay? Now, option 3. America and China sorted out amongst themselves like two giant toddlers with nuclear capabilities and nobody else in the world has to suffer. Yeah, that's the option. That's option 3. Option 4, if you're still in the game, and this is an actual serious option. Southeast Asian countries desperately need to invest in their own technology, their own workforce, their own industrial capacity, so that they're not permanently dependent on China and permanently undercut by Chinese exports, which historically is the economic equivalent of telling someone to just eat healthy and exercise. Technically correct, but in implementation, it's approximately very, very hard. So here's the thing. The flying geese are confused. They're listless. America is firing tariff spells at anything that moves. China is producing everything, everywhere, all at once. And somewhere in an industrial estate outside of Kuala Lumpur, a beautiful place, there's an empty factory that used to make plastic bottles. The rules that govern global development for half a century are being stress tested in real time. And the result of that test will determine whether the next billion people get to follow the same path to prosperity or end up industrially paved over. That's not a small question. That is perhaps the question of the next 30 years, the next 50 years. And the answer, terrifyingly, genuinely, surprisingly, existentially, no one knows. So with that sanguine comment, like, share and subscribe. I'm joking, no. It won't fix geopolitics, but it's something you can control. And right now that matters. Listening to me. No, I'm joking. But this has been Justin. This is the House of Trade. If you like flying geese, give me a like. If you like industrial manufacturing even more, give me another like. I don't know if you can do more than one, but ciao for now.